Could I ask you to note the following? EBS tied agents issue was in court. Has the bank looked at the outcome of that? It's a closed deal, as it were, with one individual. But I want to know what role the central bank will now play in ensuring that those that have not been in court but are pursuing the EBS and the AIB in relation to their case, can you expedite some form of mediation there in order to bring it to a conclusion? I want to know, if I were to report to you an alleged fraud, what action do you take? Do you investigate that allegation, or do you refer it to the guards? On the credit unions, again, I want to say that the credit unions are almost not being allowed to perform as they could because of the regulation that's being imposed on them. They're not being given a fair chance. And they offer a service that is exceptional and beyond what you would get in a bank. And I think that you have to give some leeway in relation to the regulation and how you're pursuing that. Mr. Kincaid, I think you mentioned that you had information on various cohorts in the different banks in terms of mortgages. You know, how many mortgages are bad and cannot be reconciled, and how many mortgages are have a possibility of being sorted. Can you provide us with detailed figures on that matter? And in terms of customer protection, then, it brings me back to the question of alleged fraud. Where a customer brings to your attention something significant that has happened in a bank, before you tell them it's a once-off case and you can't investigate it, do you take the substance of the allegation and determine if this is something that's possibly widespread or that is happening in banks? And finally, I asked the Governor, would he consider looking at the tracker mortgage issue and the cases that are left still to be worked out, and take the profile of those cases and see if they are not being worked out because the customer is wrong, or perhaps they're not being worked out because the bank is just dragging its heels on sorting it out, because it may create a precedent and there may be a significant number of others that would be impacted relative to the tracker issue. Now, I want to get a comprehensive response to all of those, and I've asked the Governor to, I will be making a submission to him on those issues, and I'm bringing all of these to your attention also, because I believe that they are significant, and the banks think that they have got away with the tracker issue based on the balances of accounts that are left in the bank still unresolved. And I hope that the consumer protection element of the central bank, or section of the central bank, will take an interest in what is being said here. So on the questions that have been put that you can respond to, in short, please do. On the questions that you feel deserve a more comprehensive answer, well then please take note of them and respond to us in due course.
Thank you, Deputy. And I'll do my best, because there's a lot in there. Maybe I'll kick off on a few, and maybe try to group some of them, if I may, if you want me to be brief and succinct.
I do, because we're hot for time.
Sorry, thank you, Chair. So first of all, I think on the tracker issue, to be very, very clear, I think it's over 99% of the cases that we have identified in our review, they have concluded and compensation has been paid. So there are no unresolved tracker cases in that sense. There are a number of cases remaining where I believe customers can't be contacted, or they may be dormant or whatever over time. The cases that are before the Ombudsman, we made very specific provision to make sure that people could both get the compensation through the central bank scheme and still have the capacity to go to the Ombudsman if they wish to take a case because they felt in their personal circumstances they had an additional claim to make, or they were in any way dissatisfied with the outcome that was yielded from that. And those are the cases that are referred to in the Ombudsman's report from Monday.
You said that most of the tracker mortgages that were considered as part of that investigation are concluded. That's not so from my perspective anyway. I've come across an awful lot of tracker mortgage issues where the bank has simply dragged its heels and where it has not resolved them. And they're still there in dispute. That's why I'm bringing it up here. The tracker mortgage scandal is something that, in my opinion, is not concluded by far. And I said earlier on to the Governor that what's happening here is some of these loans are being sold to pass on the distressed mortgage, even though it's still a tracker issue. Some of them are being forced into court if there's a receivers involved. And the cases that I have inform me to the extent that I believe the central bank has an obligation to go through the remains of that investigation and ensure that the banks are not hiding any more tracker mortgage issues. Because if you do that, you will then be informed of the ones that are outstanding and the ones that are being put into question, if you like, by the bank in an unreasonable way. And I looked at some of the paperwork, and I have to say that, you know, the alleged fraud jumps out at me in terms of a number of these cases. So I'm asking you, you know, to take that on board as being a relevant piece of information and to investigate further the banks on these issues.
So, thank you, David.
I'm not happy at all with the outcome of the. I am happy in general, but not in relation to specific cases, and they remain there. And as long as they remain there, this committee and Parliament has an obligation to ensure that the banks are pursued until such time as you are happy that everything has been concluded. And if you get individual cases, you know, I know you don't investigate individual cases, but you have to take from the cases a direction of some kind because they're telling you something.
So Deputy, forgive me, I'm just coming on to say that in saying that, that is not to say that there is any sort of, you know, closed book or conclusion reached. Once we've reached a conclusion on an exercise, you're right to say there are still cases going through those processes that you've outlined. In relation to the Ombudsman, which I think was where the original question came from, we are very engaged with the Ombudsman across all of those cases. It's one of the areas where we get sight on all of the cases that they identify, and it is absolutely our practice to consider them and see if there's further action to take. So one of the things I wanted to get across was that where we see a need or something is brought to our attention of a need for further action, whether it's in relation to tracker or any other review that we've done, we will of course take that action. But I suppose I was just trying to sort of parcel out between, for people to understand, the review that we did, the cases that are at the Ombudsman, and any further action items that are brought to our attention. And we have, I think, a strong track record and practice of taking, whether it's Ombudsman's cases, whether it's High Court cases, or issues that are brought to our attention, and actually not just dealing with that individual case, as you say, but actually looking beyond that to see if there's a more systemic issue in that firm or beyond that. And we will continue to do that, whether it is in the area of tracker or business interruption or any of the other areas where we have done that. Deputy, on the tied agents issue, I don't have much to add beyond what we said in this forum before. We would take any information in relation to that and assess it by reference to our functions. To date, the information we received, we haven't concluded that there was a basis for action, but we will look at any information that we receive. On the question of fraud, we do report concerns that we would have in relation to fraud to An Garda Síochána, but obviously if there's any information that you or any member would like to bring to the Central Bank, we will look at it, and there's an avenue for that through to there. On Deputy Doherty's earlier point about my remarks earlier in relation to the obligation of the bank, that was said, to be really clear, in a context of being asked, well, what does it mean for the Central Bank to be scrutinising this, and how might we intervene? The notification period in our code, which is around 2 months or so, is a notification to customers on a proposal to close an account. As Mary Elizabeth has said, everything, the scale of this thing is such that everything is on the table in terms of the Central Bank reaching a conclusion that we need to intervene in a particular way. So I wouldn't feel constrained in any way in relation to that. But I would reiterate the message that it's important that we get started in the process and start to make as much movement through that portfolio of accounts as we can.
I'm obliged, sorry, Mr. McGuinness.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, Deputy Doherty, who put questions and others have. We actually have to conclude the meeting because of the arrangements here in the House. So I'm sorry for having to
That's okay.
Do that. I'm just going to say to you on the EBS question, by way of conclusion, that is not good enough that a bank, would settle with one particular agent and not the others, and that use the court case to close down everything else. I understand that there may be a mediation process, but I'd say to the Central Bank, I believe you have a role here, and I will continue to raise it. And I would ask you just to maybe get the up-to-date on that court case and see can we insist on the mediation process. Again, I'm sorry for having to cut it short, but you can respond to us in writing.